at some point, we'll have the other stuff in it, but I haven't made up my mind when we're going to do our test, because I want 2 more tests for the school year. One's a real test, and one to be like a project that I'm going to have y'all work on. The project's going to be in May, and the test will probably be towards the end of April. And so, we'll get there, right? So we left. Oh yeah. It's April the 12th, and this is our Civilization 2/World History course. And so, like I was saying in the class here, we're going to have a quiz tomorrow. Quizlet has a set for us on this, and I posted it in the Google Classroom. It should have auto-posted 4 minutes ago. So make sure you study that. We're almost done with this unit. We're going to have 2 more units for the school year, and then we'll be done. And we'll just do your project, which to be continued. All right. So we ended up last time we were talking about a lot about politics and economics. So we were talking about Adam Smith last time. He wrote The Wealth of Nations, which is kind of like the idea of capitalism, though he never called it capitalism. That was actually a phrase coined by someone else we're going to talk about here in a minute. And so, cool thing about this period is that there's going to be a lot of rough bumps where people are going to start getting more and more spending money and stuff, but they're going to eventually learn what they can do with that money. And you're going to have essentially middle-class culture build up, communities built around the idea of industry and profit, and also the right to vote. And so here we see an early Booth. Voting in America has gone through all kinds of different changes. It used to have essentially a count of hands. And throughout much of our early history, when we did have ballots, people were open about who they voted for. In fact, if you try to keep your ballot secret, people were very party you were voting for. Sometimes that would be bad. Before we got to the idea of secret ballots like we have today, where it's your business, so no one else's. All right, so political changes. We have the beginnings of universal manhood suffrage in places like America and in England. So first off, it's going to start out with men, and it's going to have to be, in the case of America, free men. So we'll talk about that a lot next year. And universal, that means it didn't matter what class or property or education you had. And suffrage, the right to vote. Let's go start off, we'll see in England with the Reform Bill of 1832. And around the same period in America, you're going to see the right to vote expand greatly too. And that's going to lead to the rise of people we'll talk about next year, like Andrew Jackson. And so this is something we're seeing in the English-speaking countries. The idea of more and more people can vote, and then categories can vote after that, and keep adding and keep adding and keep adding until we have the right to vote we have today. In England, you're going to have something called the Chartism movement, which is kind of like a very modernizing political movement in Great Britain that's going to influence America as well. 1838 to 1848, a political party that called for universal suffrage. Everyone has the right to vote. Vote by ballot. And a vote by ballot can be counted. It prevents cheating. If you have an auditorium of people and somebody's listening, if you want the guy on the left, say me. All right, if you want the guy on the right, say me. And then the person who's I think they said a few more, so they got it. That's not fair. And a ballot can be secret. You might come from a neighborhood, everybody voted for one politician. And if you're like, I don't like that guy, he's a crook, and you vote for somebody else, well, they're going to find out. They're probably going to beat you up. Political violence was a normal thing. So vote by ballot could be secret. Annual parliaments. So the lawmaking body of England didn't meet very often. So they wanted annual parliaments so that they could see to problems as they came up, at least once a year. Equal electoral districts. So what that means is there were some places in England that had representatives, but no people. Are called rotten boroughs. They wanted Parliament to represent the people, not necessarily a few rich people. And some other reforms. Mostly like workers' and stuff like that. Political parties developed in Great Britain, the Whigs and the Tories. And so, kind of like America, where you have Democrats and Republicans. One wing is going to be more of a liberal and one's going to be more of a conservative wing. The shift leads to a divide in Britain between liberals and conservatives. So you can think of, now when we think of this, the term liberal and conservative had a little different meaning back then than it does now. But generally speaking, back then, liberals was more around the idea of individual rights, and conservative was more about order and tradition and the monarchy, the king. So a little different there, a little different, especially when compared to today. We don't have a king here in America. So yeah, go right ahead. Now, a few of these things will be on your quiz, but don't worry. I posted the Quizlet sets, and I'll let you look at it. And so it was like 35 terms, something like that. Not too bad. But a lot of these, I think you're going to be like, oh, yeah, everybody knows that. It's going to look like a vocabulary thing. So, yeah. Yeah, it looks like he's having a Jesus moment. This is supposed to be, I think, a union meeting outside of a factory. And so here you have workers and they're meeting with their union leader. But yeah, he's definitely kind of like, take me up now. So, political changes. Not everyone believed that the free market was an optimal economic system. So as we talked about before, in these early factories, being a worker sucked really bad. It was dangerous. It was dirty. It was long hours. Your boss treated you like garbage because he knew he could place you anytime he wanted to. There's no insurance. Like it was just bad. There's so many bad things. You got good things, and the nation was doing better and improving, but you know it was a really ugly place to be in. And so you're going to have an opposition ideology come up, and that's going to be you're going to have different branches of socialism, but one that's going to catch on is called communism. It's going to be popularized by a German named Karl Marx. He's going to be exiled from Germany. They're going to be like, whoa, this guy's crazy. They're going to kick him out. He's going to go to England and live with his friend Friedrich Engels, a philosopher. And they're going to develop, with the help of other communist socialists, something they call the Communist Manifesto. And so the document claimed that the poor would overthrow the middle class and establish a utopian state. Marxism is it's a really weird thing because it develops something called historicism, or it doesn't develop it, it builds on it. It's the idea that you can predict the future based on studying history. But the weird thing about communism is that they're making a prediction on the future of history, but what they're predicting will happen is something that's never happened in history. So it's kind of a weird puzzle. But it has a lot to do, like they wanted to do a lot of things. Like they wanted to ban individual property, religion, the family, a lot of things like that. The idea was that one day eventually, because of industry, everybody would have everything they need, so people don't really need to own anything, and so everyone can essentially share to each one's needs and stuff. So, but it called for an entire restructuring of society and humanity. But unlike, as we'll see in American history later on when we study it, like in Russia and stuff, they didn't believe it should have been a violent overthrow of governments like we saw in Russia and Cuba. So there's going to be, however, different ideas that come up from that. So yeah, so this is going to be the birth of capitalism and its polar opposite, communism, which is definitely something to talk a lot about in government and economics, and seniors, and 11th grade. We'll talk about it. We're talking about world events and history. So yeah, ideology shapes history. pretty. What is it? I really don't remember why I picked some of these paintings. I might have just picked period pieces. But I don't remember the context of a lot of these paintings. Looks neat. All right, so political changes continue. Socialist literature spreads through workers' unions. So socialism is the idea of no more private ownership. So a lot of these people, they were very upset because like, you know why our lives suck so bad? It's because of the boss. It's because of the company owner. And so maybe the company owner owning it, maybe the workers should own the business or the government, and then things get distributed more evenly. So socialist literature spreads through workers' unions as a chance for the poor to have more wealth and protection. Factory owners and entrepreneurs oppose socialism because such policies would control or even confiscate their property. And so from their standpoint, they're like, well, I'm the one who built this and owns it. You can't just take it from me. Anarchist movements, though, will also develop among disenfranchised youth in Europe. So these are going to be, this is an ideology that's going to be like, forget capitalists, forget communist. We believe in just no government. It stemmed from an idea of people living in nature again, almost. But it was a very violent movement. We're going to have presidents assassinated by anarchists. There's going to be a rash of bombings all throughout the world, even here in America, terrorist bombings by anarchists. The First World War is going to be started by a group of anarchists doing an assassination. It's going to be a worldwide, a big worldwide movement. These anarchists would do acts of terror, cause U.S. limit migration to keep it away from America. Yeah, there's going to be a time period where they're going to ban people from Italy and Eastern Europe from coming to America. It's like, whoa, there's too many anarchists there. If they come over, they'll start blowing us up. So you might see similar ideas today where people are like, whoa, we can't bring in people from this part of the world because they do bombs and stuff. So sometimes history repeats itself, you know. Now, tell people who are kind of like this today, they're sort of professed anarchist. But just because somebody is an anarchist doesn't mean necessarily that they're a terrorist, though, you know what I'm saying? But back then, it was a big problem. A lot of they hated anything that was like an establishment structure of authority. That would include religions and factories, governments, and just anything that had any authority position. Kind of a hard one to peg as far as a solid ideology. Sure. Cool. 2 more. All right. You got some guys doing some iron working. I don't know what they're making, steel beams or something like that. All right, so inventors and inventions. So during this time period, you're going to see a lot of, because of the fruits of the scientific revolution, and because people were very motivated to get rich. Like if you could make a great invention, and if you could get a copyright or a patent for your invention, that you're the only one who gets to make money off that thing and no one else can, that was a good way to get rich. And you could become famous, and people respected you for your intellect, right? So there's a lot of motivation to do this. So you have people like James Watt. He's going to invent the steam engine. Now, the Romans invented the first steam engine, but they thought it was a toy. They didn't see a need for it. They're like, well, why do we need something to do this? We've got a lot of people who do that for us. Because you remember Romans they would conquer a people and enslave them. They're like, nah, no thanks. But of course, remember that stuff is banned by now. through much of the world. America still had to wait, but it'll get there. But the steam engine is going to do cool things like Robert Fulton's invention, the steamboat. That's going to change the face of America because the steamboat's going to allow river trade to economically go both ways. Before this time in America, we were blessed with a lot of rivers, and you could sail your goods down one direction, going back up to the ocean. But then the other way is back upstream. You're better off just walking back home. But the steamboat would change that. It could efficiently go both ways, up and down the river. Eli Whitney will invent the cotton gin. The cotton gin is going to revolutionize the Southern American economy, making the bolls of cotton, a native plant from India, where they could, instead of having to pick the seeds out by hand, you could just turn the crank of this machine and make a very economically valuable material. But historians would point out, because this was so valuable, it's going to grow slavery in America. Roads and riverways improve trade and travel. Railroads, another blessing of the steam engine, is going to allow, like here in North America, trade to go not just north and south, mostly up and down the rivers like the Mississippi, but also east and west. This is going to grow states and communities and connect the West and much of America to the East. So yeah, it's going to be super, super important. This is going to allow farmers to not just have to sell to the people around them, but now they can bag up their goods and sell them to the ports to go out to the world. They're going to become parts of the worldwide market. And wherever railroads went, the telegraph wire followed it. And it allowed news and information and even warnings to go instantaneously from one end of a country to another. So that's going to be revolutionary as well. You don't have to wait like days or weeks for a letter and then send another letter back home asking what, and then waiting again. You can at least use Morse code to at least semi-instantaneously communicate with one another. So that's going to be a big change. So we see we're moving so far away from the Middle Ages we were talking about earlier in the year. And it's happening fast. Relatively speaking, most of human history is slow. You'll have 100 generations of people just doing the same thing their great grandparents did. But now it's changing. It's changing fast, real fast. One generation is just so different from the next one. Something to do with an observatory. All right, so last one. All right, some more on inventors. You have Marie Curie proved that radiation can be used to treat some diseases, such as chemotherapy. Thomas Edison, more than 1,300 patents, ranging from the modernized telephone, improved light bulb, motion picture equipment. Louis Pasteur, he's going to be a French chemist who's going to discover that heat can kill bacteria, and if you find the right temperature, you can kill bacteria without destroying certain properties. So we get pasteurized milk. So you can kill the bacteria in milk, so it's relatively more shelf stable and can be shipped instead of spoiling overnight. I mean, that's pretty good. You don't have to have a dairy cow in your backyard. Of course, I'd like to have one. But I'm lactose intolerant, so maybe I wouldn't. But yeah, I was going to add more to this slide set, but then I decided to break it up into a second unit. And so we'll start that next unit later in the week. So yeah, just keep in mind the things that aren't on our quiz tomorrow could still be testable on our upcoming test in 2 or 3 weeks towards the end of April. So just keep that in mind. And then May, after the EOC, we're going to work on a final project. After the EOC week, the 1st of May. Well, not yours, right? Not yours. But like a lot of students are going to take EOCs that first week of May, like 11th grade, like, ninth grade's got like 3 tests, right?
Yeah,
So,
4.
4. So yeah,
Aw.
and 8th grade, and all these other kids. So yeah, like those other kids gotta take all those tests. So
Is this the last slide?
yeah, it's the last one. It's the last one for the unit 2. It's gonna be our separation point. All right, kids. So I put the Quizlet set you're gonna need up on the Google Classroom. Please make sure you study that today. And hey, I'll have it ready for you tomorrow. So no lecture tomorrow though, just a quiz.